Burnout in Canadian workplaces is reaching critical levels and is at a critical mass. As of early 2026, 62% of today's Canadian workforce reported feeling burnt out, which is up sharply from the 47% who reported the same symptoms and feelings in 2024, putting both retention and productivity at risk. At the same time, and by the same token, while 68% of employees say that their workplaces feel psychologically safe, nearly a quarter disagree. And nearly 70% of employees express concern about their overall psychological well-being on the job, according to Mental Health Research Canada. In this episode, we explore the hidden weight behind these numbers, the parts of work that aren't captured in job descriptions or performance metrics. Because the truth is, the hardest part of work isn't the work itself, but rather the conversations that people avoid, the assumptions they carry, and the cognitive and emotional strain which make even simple tasks feel overwhelming. Today I'm joined by my friend, Dr. Liane Davey. She is a New York Times best-selling author of the book, The Good Fight, and Your First Organizational Psychologist, and the co-founder of Three Co's Incorporated, known as the Teamwork Doctor. And she works with leaders and industries from Walmart to Amazon, TD Bank, and Sony PlayStation, helping them to navigate what she calls thoughtload, which is classified as the mental and emotional burden which often tends to exhaust people more than the work itself. Together, she helps organizations and employees understand how thoughtload contributes to burnout, why productive conflict is healthy for thriving and building teams, and how leaders can balance accountability with empathy in an era where the reality of constant change is inevitable. In this conversation, it's a must-listen for anyone in organizational leadership looking to build stronger and more resilient teams, while protecting their well-being in today's demanding workforce environment. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to talk to you about how you help organizations level up their performance and reduce burnout. It's great to see you, and happy Wednesday to you, my friend.
Thank you so much. Happy Wednesday to you too.
Absolutely, my friend. And you and I both know that burnout is a chronic problem in today's workforce because, some of the executives are concerned with the level of productivity without investing in the quality of their people in terms of their mental health and performance. And I know you help leaders think about their thought load and how it's distributed throughout their workforce. So I wonder if you can tell me about that and what makes you so fabulous, my friend.
All right, let's start with the thought load and then we'll talk about being fabulous. So thought load, just let me clarify, because once you make up a word, it's nice to actually tell people what the heck you're talking about.
Absolutely.
So I was watching these burned out, overwhelmed people that you were talking about, and people kept talking to me about how their workload was so heavy and whether that was an excuse for why a friend couldn't come to book club or whatever else. And I started watching and realizing that, well, people keep complaining about their workload, but I don't see a lot of work getting done. And I started to realize that, I have a lot of empathy for folks. I feel the same overwhelm and burnout, but I realized that it's not the workload that's killing us, it's the thought load. So thought load is this invisible tax on our performance that comes from rising cognitive demands, like how much we're supposed to pay attention to in any given day, plus increasing emotional burdens. So just how emotional everything is. People are angry, they're upset, they're afraid, they're anxious, and all of that's in the workplace. And so if you think about that as the load, then we carry that load with declining energy reserves. And that load is feeling heavier and heavier because we got no gas left in the tank. So that's the idea that I've been working on, is not how do we reduce our workload. We can't afford to reduce our workload in this world. We got a lot of competition. We don't want to be replaced by AI. We can't reduce our workload, but we don't have to. If we reduce our thought load, we'll actually get a lot more done while feeling a lot less stressed. So that's what I've been working on.
Yeah, absolutely, my friend. So, based on your last answer, I'm curious to follow up with this. How do you think we can reimagine the concept or definition of productive work in today's workforce? What are your thoughts there?
Oh, I love that. Okay, great question. So let's differentiate between three different things. So we can pay attention to our activity at work, right? How many emails did I respond to? How many meetings did I go to? All of those sorts of things. That's our activity. Then we have our output. How many things did I create or finish or get done or produce? And then the third thing we can pay attention to is our outcomes. Did we change the world in the way we were hoping to change the world? And that might be, if we work in IT, reducing the number of people who click on phishing links, or selling a more valuable product mix, if that's the world we're in. Okay, so activities, outputs, and outcomes. So the thing is, most leaders are paying too much attention to our activity. Just, are we working long hours? Are we in the office when it's dark outside? How quickly are we responding to their emails? And when you pay attention to activity, all you become is busy. So we need to stop focusing first on activity. But if we shift to paying attention to output, then all we get is productive. It means that we can shoot out a lot of stuff. But just because we can produce a lot of stuff doesn't mean that it's actually moving the needle on the things that matter. So I think we have to get away from paying attention to productivity, just how much stuff are we producing, and we need to shift to focusing on effectiveness. Is the work that we're doing actually creating the changes in the world? So we need to put things on its head. Instead of just doing as much activity as possible and hoping the world will change, figuring out what are the things that we can do that change the world, and starting to do fewer of the things that don't make any difference. So that's a really important point in the book Thought Load, is we've got to get away from rewarding productivity, because a lot of what we're producing is slop that's taking a lot of energy but adding no value.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I know that you bring this message to audiences as a keynote speaker, and I know that you're known as the teamwork doctor, and you're a New York Times best-selling author of the Fight the Good Fight, and you recently released a new book called The Thoughtload, my friend, and I
Yeah.
know that you help, organizational leaders from boardrooms to the front lines navigate the emotional weight we've been talking about. So I'm curious to ask you about the emotional weight that people carry when they go to work, because oftentimes when we go to work, we bring it home to us, and it's a part of our thought process. And I know that you help organizations through that. So I'm curious to ask you about, authentically connecting with audiences, but also, what you believe is healthy emotional intelligence at work today. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah. So, what's interesting is we might be able to leave our workload at work, but we can't leave our thought load at work. Right. And we even our workload at home, you got to load the dishwasher, make the dinner. When you leave the house, you don't take the dishes with you. The workload stays at home. But if the kids left their breakfast dishes on the table again, and you're annoyed and frustrated that you've raised little entitled little creatures and you're beating yourself up about what you did wrong, that thought load, that emotional residue comes with you to the office. And if you have a terrible meeting, if someone doesn't like your idea, then you bring that emotional residue home with you. So what we have to understand is humans are emotional creatures. Emotions are in our basic operating system, and trying to ignore them or suppress them does not help us. We need to use them. And so thought load talks a lot about how do we process our emotions so that we can get the data out of them, because there is data in our emotion. We learn things about our environment from it. How do we process it so we get the data out, but that we don't get to the point of all the drama getting whipped up? And that's a huge issue, because when you come into the workplace, we're all vulnerable to what's called emotional contagion, where if I'm really annoyed that my kids left their dishes on the breakfast table again this morning, and I walk in with a big storm cloud over my head, the people in the room may not know why I interrupt them or I'm really curt with them. They may think it's about them when really it was just about the kids and the breakfast dishes. But that emotion will spread on a team incredibly quickly. So we have to get better at emotional regulation, at understanding, and on that commute to work, being like, okay, what do I need to leave behind? What do I need to process so that it's kind of out of my thought load and I can go to this meeting in the morning and engage with my colleagues from a level playing field, as opposed to kind of going in mad and spreading my mood to everybody else. So learning to be more aware of our emotional reactions, to take the data out of them, but not buy into the drama that we often tell ourselves, stories that are not very helpful. And certainly to make sure that we don't spread any negative emotions to everybody else around us. So there's a lot we need to do to learn. I talk about it in the book as we're not a very emotionally literate society. We don't have the language to talk about our emotions. And therefore we don't do a very good job of it. So lots of work to do to get better at processing our emotions.
Yeah, 100%. And Liane, I'm also curious to ask you, how do you think we can rethink our approach to leadership and recruitment to meet people where they are in order to maximize productivity, but also to maximize emotional wellness? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, well, so my background is as a psychologist, right? So, I think we need to know the difference between the things that we can train in humans, the skills we can build, versus the traits and characteristics that are very likely to be enduring in someone's life. And we need to be more clear about what makes a great manager, what makes a great leader. And those are two different things. And be much, much, much more disciplined about, putting the people in these roles who are well suited to them, who will learn and grow within these roles, as opposed to just using management as the only way to reward technical proficiency or technical excellence. Because it's a big responsibility to be someone's manager, to being able to help them focus their attention on what matters, to help them process their emotions, to help them restore and renew their energy. Not just everyone can do that, because first of all, you have to be on top of your own thought load and still have enough left to help others. So in recruitment and selection of management and leaders, I think we need to get much more clear about what it takes to be good at that job, and be looking for the things that are really difficult to train, select for those things, and then train for the rest.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that vein, I'm also curious to ask you, because I have a cerebral palsy, and I talk to organizational leaders about the importance of amplifying the hiring of folks with disabilities and how that can bring innovation and different thought processes to organizations. So I'm curious about your thoughts on the importance of hiring people with disabilities, how that helps organizational culture, and how we can help organizations and their leaders sort of eliminate the attitudinal barriers surrounding hiring folks with disabilities. What are your thoughts there?
I love it. It's such an interesting question. And, one of the problems when we have really high thought load is we just become very self-centered. We are just like doing everything we can to cope and survive ourselves. And I think that's making our society ugly in a lot of ways. And so, when you need to work with someone, and so physical disabilities, mental health issues, various different forms of diversity, what's interesting about them is they often slow things down at first, right? So they require that you are more present and you're more thoughtful. That makes our ideas better. That makes our connection stronger. That makes us more innovative. But in a world where we are so obsessed with productivity, it makes us often slower. And we think slower, like, who has time for that? I don't have time for that. I don't have time to deal with somebody who is on the autism spectrum, who has ADHD, who has cerebral palsy, who uses a wheelchair to get, I don't have time for that. And what I would say is that if you don't have time for that, you don't have time for connection, collaboration, innovation, productive conflict. So in some ways, I think all what we're doing in bringing in diverse folks, who we need to be deliberate about how do we set up this person to be successful. That's just good practice. That's going to make our teams stronger. It's going to make our businesses better. And if we get out of this sense that being expedient and the fastest answer is the right thing, and I think that's where we're stuck. And I think that's terrible for people with disabilities, but it's also terrible for all the rest of us who are just gliding along the top of life, not thinking deliberately about things. And it's going to catch up to us. It's really terrible. And it's interesting. My daughter works with at a summer camp with people with various different disabilities, some of whom are nonverbal. Mm-hmm. And we've had lots of great conversations about how rewarding it is for her when she really gets to know someone and learns their cues and their signals and learns to communicate with them, even though they're nonverbal, and how rich an experience that is. And I'm like, yeah, imagine if more of us could pick up more from one another, have that quality of connection. And it's just, we just don't. And I think it's a huge loss where our thought load is so high. We're just thinking about ourselves. We don't have time for anybody. And we're missing so much richness.
Diversity of thought also lightens the load, doesn't it?
It sure does. Well, so I think as a psychologist, what I would say is it actually increases the load in the short term, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to cope with it. It's like, oh, that person's thinking differently than me. Oh, they come from a different background than me. Oh, they are like whatever. So it raises the load in the short term. Ultimately, I think it leads to way better decisions, way better outcomes. But I think the problem is we're so short-sighted right now that we think that it raising the load in the short term is like not worth it. And it's not true. It's
Yeah.
so worth it.
Yeah, and you say that. I want to return to something you said earlier because you said the hardest part of work isn't the actual task itself, but everything surrounding those tasks. And you say that companies and organizations and employees are avoiding the conversations about assumptions that can make their mental and emotional burdens sort of go away, my friend. So talk to me about the conversations that we're avoiding and that we should have. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, that was my previous book was called The Good Fight because
Yeah.
I really believe that our teams are having way too little conflict. We are afraid of uncomfortable. We're just afraid of discomfort in general. I think that's the other thing about working with people with disabilities is that we feel awkward, right? You meet someone who has some kind of issue with their limbs, and it's like, okay, well, I don't know how to shake their hand. They like, do I shake their hand? And I'm like, that that's not uncomfortable. If you walk up to the person, give them a big smile and say, what's your greeting of choice? Like what, right? Or whatever. But we just don't even like being the least bit uncomfortable. So if we can't even handle that, how do we handle an uncomfortable conversation about someone's motives in a decision? How do we handle an uncomfortable decision about a trade-off between whether we spend resources on this or on this? How do we deal with the discomfort of giving someone feedback that the choices they've made have had a negative impact on us? Like we just don't like and aren't willing to be uncomfortable anymore. And if we're not willing to be uncomfortable, so many things are off limits. So much growth, so much potential is off limits if you're unwilling to be uncomfortable. And I've been reading stuff about AI lately, about people getting into relationship with an AI. And they're like, the AI gets me more than any human has ever got me. I'm like, yeah, because it's just telling you what you want to hear. Like you are going to be ruined forever having a relationship with a human if your expectation is that the whole purpose of this AI is to just always make you feel good about yourself. That's not what the world is about. And so I'm really worried as this sort of overarching theme that our tolerance for being uncomfortable is bottoming out, and that's affecting so many things and constraining us in such profound ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a big believer, Leanne, in the power of self-reflection and using emotions as strength. I think we can use emotions and vulnerability as strength, and
Yeah.
you say that we can use them also to help us guide us through some of our hardships and trials and tribulations at work. So how can we
Yeah.
use our emotions as a guiding system to create a competitive advantage? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, so because so many people are afraid of being uncomfortable, they aren't using the emotional information. And our senses, including interoception, which is the sense that comes from our body understanding what's going on inside, there is a lot of information in there. And if you're somebody willing to sort of lean into that discomfort, so if you're starting to feel anxiety and you're willing to stop and go, where am I feeling that? Oh, my palms are sweating, or my heart is racing. Or if you are willing to have that discomfort, then you get access to this whole layer of meaning that's going on here. And it can become your superpower, because then you stop and you say, all right, so I've already kind of asked where this is happening. I can next ask what is happening. So understanding exactly which emotion, like, okay, this is sort of, anxiety, I may say, but even more specifically, it's like imposter syndrome. Okay, great. That's what I'm feeling. Then, like, why am I feeling that? What story am I telling myself that is convincing me or telling my body that I should be on alert and I should be anxious? And is that story true? Is that real? Or is it possible that I'm just making that up? And of course, the reality with most of us is that often we're making it up. So we're having a base emotional experience, but we're layering onto it this whole narrative about like why we're justified in feeling that way. And the person who can stop and interrogate those feelings instead of just being a sucker and buying into them, that person has a huge superpower over the other person in the room or the other person competing for a job or whatever else who's just buying it, right? And not leaving themselves with the flexibility to choose how they choose to feel in a situation, what they choose to do. So if you get good at recognizing where your emotions are happening, what they are, why you're telling yourself that story, and then coming up with something you can do to move forward, you're going to be so far ahead of all those other guys. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you have an innovative series that talks about lowering the mental load, my friend, in 8 weeks. So what do people need to know about this series, and why do you love it so much, my friend?
Yeah. So when I was coming up to the launch of Thoughtload, I decided, okay, if I could help give them a teaser of the book in 8 weeks and just one thing each week. And so it really lowering your thought load comes down to three things. So first, you need to focus your distracted attention. And that starts with talking about what we were talking about earlier, which is, do I know the most important outcomes? I talk about it in the book as if you were a knight who's on a noble quest. What is my quest? Then how do I align my time and energy with the things that are most important to that quest? So focusing your distracted attention is the first thing. Second, like we've talked about, processing your triggered emotions. So all of the techniques to understand what you're experiencing emotionally, to interrogate the feelings and stories you're telling yourself, and to move through it. And then the third thing is about how do you treat your energy as a renewable resource? How do you tap into the waterfalls and wells to fill your cup? So that's what the series did. It went through on LinkedIn 8 different things you could do to meaningfully reduce your thought load in 8 weeks. So yeah, that was great fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And Liane, I'm curious to get your thoughts on this because according to the Gallup 2025 State of the Workplace Global Survey, it found that the U.S. and Canada have the highest level of daily stress, my friend, at 50%. So what do you think of those findings, and how can leaders be a conscious, monitor of stress at work and be an ally to their employees? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
So the first thing, again, I always come back to, you can't take the psychologist out of me for sure. So first of all, we have to say stress is a physiological response we have that's meant to keep us safe. So being stressed is really great if you have to outrun the saber-toothed tiger. So we shouldn't talk about stress as a uniformly negative thing. So there is some stress that is, I have a big presentation tomorrow, and that little bit of stress makes it easier for me to stay up and make sure my presentation is really good. That's a positive thing. So that's called eustress, eustress. So eustress, we should remember, stress helps us in many ways to be able to do the things we need to do. What we have to worry about is distress. So the kind of stress that actually makes us less effective, that scatters our thinking, that triggers cortisol in our body in a way that if we have it for too long, it's a really negative thing. So the first thing is we have to differentiate between good stress and bad stress. The key thing for leaders is understanding, like, what are the things that are worth being stressed about? So there should be things that are very important, things that will move our outcomes, things that will create value. And it's okay to have some degree of stress for those things, particularly if we can make choices and do things that will alleviate the stress. So if you have a big presentation, I can do research, make sure I know my audience. I can, put work into making this presentation really tight. Those are the things that will reduce my stress and allow me to succeed. What we have to worry about as leaders is when people have 17 things they're stressed about, things that they can't control, things that feel like friction that wear them down. Because if we stay in distress for too long, that's where we get to burnout. So we need to change the conversation about stress. Stress is not a uniformly bad thing. We need to understand it's there to help us in lots of situations, but we want it to be focused on the things that matter, not being stressed about things that don't matter. We want it to be controllable so I can take actions that alleviate my stress. We want to make sure it's not something that we have to endure without a break, and that there is natural rest and recuperation from stress.
Yeah, absolutely. And Liane, I know that you're recovering adrenaline junkie, my friend. So I want to talk to you about time management, because you tell me that you found the importance of significantly improving your time management over the years, and you used to struggle with things like procrastination, but also liking.
Telling all my secrets, Kevin.
Well, that's quality of good research, right? While also liking the last minute rush of adrenaline, my friend. So talk to me about effective time management and sort of the evolution that you've gone through yourself personally, and how you help others do the same, my friend.
Well, that's a great segue from the comment or the question about stress, right? Because what I was doing with my procrastination is using stress to my advantage, right? Waiting until the last minute when the stress got really high, and therefore I could use stress to motivate me instead of using something more sustainable to motivate me. So at a certain stage in my life, I was like, this is killing me. This is not a good way to be. So I learned about time management. So how do I understand? So one of the things I talk about in the book is I have a chapter called Make 3 Lists, Not 1. So the to-do list is a terrible practice. When we have a to-do list with a whole bunch of things on it, we don't choose very wisely which thing to do first. So the first part of time management is understanding, what are my 3 lists? So the first list should be the most important and impactful activities I need to do in service of my quest. The second list should be the most important and impactful activities I need to do as someone's colleague, as a good member of the team, to help them advance their quests. And the third list is those side quests. I got to do the compliance training or whatever those things are. So first of all, having 3 separate lists, and then using time blocking to say, what is the best time in my calendar? And for me, I'm a morning person. So if I'm going to be advancing my quest, I don't want to be doing it Thursday at 4:00 where I'm squishing it in, because I will not be very with it. I want to put those tasks in first in my prime time. Then I can put the second list of tasks in my secondary kind of time, and then, put in those side quests. That's what Thursday at 4:00 is for, or in 10 minutes between meetings. So learning how to use your time so that it actually serves your priorities, instead of letting everybody else's priorities fill your calendar and feeling like you have to put your meaningful work in kind of at 9:00 at night or on a weekend. So yeah, I now am very serious about time management. I use tools like Calendly as a scheduling app. I get a lot of calls from people asking, I want to write a book. Can I talk to you? Or I want to be a keynote speaker. And I have a Calendly link just for that. It's like the pick your brain Calendly link. And there's really only like 1 hour every week that's at a time where I'm not going to be getting other work done. And that's the time that I use for that. And so if there's a lineup of people, and if the person can't find a slot for that for 6 weeks, well, that's my priorities, right? So we have lots of tools and technology now to help us make our calendar serve our priorities instead of letting everybody else in there and have their priorities supersede ours.
Leanne, I am a recovering perfectionist myself. So I have a group of support workers that work for me, and they always try to tell me that I don't have to say yes to everything, right? So
True.
if it's not on my calendar, I don't agree to do it anymore. I'm a recovering
Good.
perfectionist myself, okay?
Good. Yes.
And Leanna, I'm curious to ask you about leading through constant change, my friend, because I used to work for the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and one of the sayings that we had were we get more done through collaboration. And I'm wondering your thoughts on the importance of leading through constant change and the importance of cross-functioning collaboration. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, so the perpetual change is something that is very, very different and not something we are built for, right? And our brains are not evolving in the last 10 years. That's not how evolution works. So we are living in an environment of perpetual change with brains and bodies that are not built for it. And so, as I was saying earlier, I think what happens is when we get that really, really high thought load, we tend to just go into survival mode, and that makes collaboration very difficult. So, to be a great collaborator, you need to walk into the meeting not just knowing your content, but did somebody share a pre-read? Is there something they'd like input on? And if you haven't had time or energy to look at their materials, you're not going to be a good collaborator. We know that great collaboration requires differences of opinion and diversity of thought and productive conflict. And if you're barely keeping it together with your own emotions, you're not going to say the contentious thing because, it's like, oh God, I can't, I don't have the energy for that. So I think until we recognize that high thought load is a huge constraint to collaboration, we're not going to understand why our teams are in as rough a shape as they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the ways we can eliminate that is to have psychological and emotional trust in the people that were in charge of
Yeah.
leading. So I'm curious to ask you, how do we balance the psychological and emotional trust in our workforce as leaders while also, developing a productivity trust as well? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, so I think I have a speech called The Great Reset where I'm trying to balance accountability and empathy. And, the biggest thing we can do to have a more positive, healthy form of accountability is we can think about accountability more as setting people up for success rather than waiting for them to fail. And setting people up for success is about having much clearer definitions of the outcomes we want them to achieve, much better focus on what is the one priority that comes first, creating a psychologically safe environment to learn and make mistakes. So it's the biggest thing I think we can do is to make sure that we are thinking about accountability as positioning people for success before they start working, as opposed to waiting for them to screw up and doing a poor job of defining what we need and then waiting to give them feedback and consequences for not delivering. So that's I just gave that speech yesterday. It's a really great one for getting that balance right.
Yeah, absolutely. And Leah, I'm curious to get your thoughts on these burnout trends as reported by the government of Canada in 2026. They report that 39 to 47% of Canadian workers report feeling burned out, while the percentage of managers who are experiencing burnout has increased their engagement by as much as a drop of 9%. So managers are less likely to engage because of their employee burnout by as much as 9%. So that's an increase since 2022. And I'm wondering your thoughts on those statistics and trends and the immediate thoughts that come to mind, my friend.
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is we have to be a little bit careful with the word burnout. It's a word that has now entered the zeitgeist, and it's kind of burnout is the new busy, I think. Like, how are you busy? How are you burned out? Like, now we've moved from just saying we're busy to saying we're burned out. So let's be careful. The World Health Organization has defined burnout. It has 4, sometimes 5 different dimensions, and it's a pretty serious thing. So when you're actually burned out, you're quite disengaged, your self-esteem goes down, your connection to your work and your colleagues goes down, you have pretty profound loss of energy. So I don't want to use the term burnout too loosely, because what people are really telling us for the most part is they're really stressed. And they're kind of tired of being stressed. Like that's certainly a thing. But most people, I do not believe that 50% of people are burned out. But I do believe that 50% of people are really tired and can't engage in the way that they were before. And that's because they've had stress that they couldn't control for such a long period of time that their bodies are starting to shut down and they're starting to pull back. So it is a real issue. But I think for the people, probably for 40% of people who, reported being burned out, but probably scientifically aren't burned out, those are the people we need to worry about and make sure that they're getting the things in place to get that stress down, get their thought load down before they do reach that burnout where they can't work, they can't get out of bed, their relationships become very estranged because they cannot form proper connections. So real burnout is a really scary thing. We got to help all the folks who feel like they're on the slippery slope to burnout before they actually get there.
Yeah, and in the few minutes I have left for you, I want to ask you about how you envision the future of workplace culture, effective time management, and really developing a great organizational culture where people feel valued. So I'm curious, what do you view as the future of work and how it relates to building a place where people want to come and contribute to workplace culture, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I'm actually quite worried at the moment. So I see so many examples where all of the attention is on productivity. I see so many situations where leaders and managers don't seem to care about the employee experience. They're just trying to pump out more work. I don't think that the work they're pumping out is going to actually create the business success. It's just going to burn people out. But I'm hopeful because I think there are starting to be companies that are realizing that is not the path they want to be on, that their source of competitive advantage, there's still an opportunity for that to come from a culture where we have focus. We're working on the most important things. We're creating the space to do that collaboratively. I'm not optimistic at the moment, unfortunately, but I do believe we're going to get this big fracturing is the first thing that's going to happen. We're going to get those that are going further and further into the work 20 hours a day. I don't care what it takes. Go, 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 go. And we're going to get those that go the other direction. The question is, do we find some kind of reconciliation in the middle? I don't think we know. We don't know what the impact of AI is going to be. We don't know what the impact of disillusioning a whole generation of workers is going to be. So I don't have a crystal ball and a clear picture. I do feel confident that the first thing that's going to happen is we're going to get 2 very, very different models. And it's going to be fun to put them head to head and see to see which one wins.
Yeah, absolutely. And my final question is a fun one. I know that you live in Toronto, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I do.
And I'm always curious because I'm also Canadian. When I interview someone, what's the best part about being Canadian for you? And then lastly, I'm curious to ask you, when your life and legacy is written, how do you want that to be defined, my friend?
Okay, so my favorite thing about being Canadian, so I am just really naturally curious about cultures. And so I live right in downtown Toronto, the most multicultural city in the world. And so I just love how many different cultures I can learn about. So one of the obvious things is all the different holidays that people are celebrating, and what is Purim, and what is Holi, and what is Eid, and I love that. Um, like just how the world comes together in Toronto. The other great thing, of course, is you can eat the most amazing food of the entire world all in this city. So I love that about this part of the world, and how for the most part we're very welcoming, and that's part of our identity is this multicultural world. So probably that. How do I want to be remembered? I really want to be remembered as someone who just threw everything she had at making work a more meaningful part of our lives. I want people to feel like I'm generous in sharing what I know and doing everything I can to help work be something meaningful, something wonderful, something that makes our lives more fulfilling. And I think for so many of us right now, certainly the 50% reporting burnout, that's not the case. And that has to change. So I hope I can move. That's my outcome. I hope I can move the needle on people feeling like work is a more positive contributor to their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, my friend, tell me if people want to get connected with you. What's the best way they can do that?
Yeah, lianedavey.com is where you'll find everything about all of my work. And then certainly LinkedIn, if people want to shoot me a note or want to make it a conversation, LinkedIn is the best place. Just watch the spelling, because my name is impossible to spell, both my first and last names. So just watch the spelling. I guess we could probably put it in the show notes, but yes, lianedavey.com.
Sounds terrific, my friend. Well, as someone who is fascinated by having curious and thought-provoking and informative conversations, I'll put this one up as my favorite of the week, my friend. I really appreciate your time and engaging in conversation with me today. The work that you're doing to elevate a better and more efficient organizational cultures, and doing your part to make sure the world of work is something that we want to resemble in 20 years, right? So
exactly.
I want to thank you for being here and engaging in conversation. It's most appreciated, my friend.
Thanks so much, Kevin.